It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
By the Patriots of Act 746, they're on a mission to educate you and everybody in the state of Arkansas, also our public officials, about the realities of your Second Amendment rights, your Arkansas rights when it comes to firearms. The possession of a firearm, the idea of it being a crime to have a gun, has been decriminalized. Possession of a firearm has been decriminalized to the point where the government has to be able to prove that you were going to do something unlawful to another person with your weapon while carrying it. It's a very difficult thing to prove. So essentially the status of Arkansas gun laws are there is no law that says you can sit on your front porch and drink iced tea. But there's no law that says you can't do that either, so therefore you can do it. And that's the status of Arkansas gun laws, thanks to Act 746. Joining us now from the Patriots of Act 746, we have Mr. Glenn Britland on the line. Glenn, welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Paul. It's good to be back on here.
Yes, sir. So tell us, we got an anniversary coming up. What is this anniversary?
Well, tomorrow is the anniversary of the Act 746 of 2013 going into effect. It was on that day that the legislation actually came into being to where it decriminalized the carrying of a handgun.
Wow. I bet you guys are stoked. I mean, you guys, since 2013, and you guys have done a ton of stuff in terms of educating your fellow citizens. I mean, it's really been amazing.
Yes, it's it's an ongoing process, and even in the last few years, we've seen an explosive growth with areas that were somewhat resistant. But it's one of those things that you just have to continue educating people and get the word out there.
So talk a little bit about we were talking earlier about the preamble to the Bill of Rights. What did you want to say about that in relation to, rights versus privileges or the Second Amendment?
Well, the preamble to the Bill of Rights basically lays out the legislative intent when the Bill of Rights was put in place, and essentially it says that the Bill of Rights are further restrictions on the government for what the government can and can't do. And as far as the Second Amendment is concerned, basically it's fairly clear, shall not be infringed. As far as how it relates with other rights, our founders were very pro landowner, pro personal rights. And
private property. They believed in private property.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, what one of the things that you'll notice if you go through the Bill of Rights is that the Third and Fourth Amendment are very much pro-property owner, pro-personal rights. The Third Amendment says that you can't house government troops in somebody's residence. The Fourth Amendment obviously is a protection to where your person's papers and effects, and especially your property, your house, can't be searched indiscriminately. You have to have a warrant. You have to have probable cause. And one of the things that a lot of people miss is that those are restrictions on government and not on people. So that a private business that puts up a sign restricting guns has every right to do that, and really should be respected. Personally, when I see a place that has one of those signs, I just shop somewhere else.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. They don't want to disarm themselves, but some people do. I support that. There was a bill, I believe it passed out of the House last year or the Senate, and I don't remember if it became law, but I actually think it did, and it had to do with basically allowing employees of a business to continue to carry their guns and leave them in their cars, even if the employer and the parking lot is his property, has a policy against has a policy against firearms on their property. And I thought, that's not right. As much as you're not being forced to work for this company, and that they shouldn't be forced to accept a policy that they disagree with if they don't want guns on their property. I mean, that's where private property rights, have got to be upheld, because, if they can't make their own decisions, then eventually maybe somebody will try to pass a law that says you can't have a policy that says you want guns on your private property.
And, well, the thing is, there is a very fine line where those rights meet and cross. And, where having a gun in your car is generally considered, your car is generally considered an extension of your home.
Yeah.
You're still coming on to someone else's property, and it is their rules. And that's one of those areas where it's very conflicted as to where does one right start and one right end. And I have to side with the property owners. However, like you said earlier, sometimes it comes down to a matter of don't ask and don't tell.
Right. No, that's another good point. Yeah, it does sometimes come down to that. Like I said, if you can tell a property owner what he wants, what is permissible to have on his property, well, then the flip side can eventually be so as well. You know what I mean? So if you
exactly,
and that's where I say that's a slippery slope. I'd rather you have your freedom and let me have my freedom over here in my property.
Exactly, and it's one of those things that, like I said, it's difficult to know where that one line starts and the other one ends. And just like having to keep the sidewalks clear on a business from ice and debris that would cause a danger, the property owner should take on a certain amount of responsibility for those restrictions and a person's safety.
Hey, Glenn, did you see the front page of the Democrat Gazette? I believe it was on Sunday. Did you get a chance to read any of that?
I read through that article. I don't get the Democrat Gazette, but I read the article online, and it was definitely a propaganda push, in my opinion.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah, this was a piece written by Jenny Monk. Violent reality. Arkansas ranks 7th in gun deaths, but weapons restrictions not on the table, where they basically criticize the Arkansas General Assembly for not putting more weapons restrictions on law-abiding citizens. According to their numbers, now this is the Arkansas Democrat Gazette research. They're the ones that dove into the numbers here, and they say that we rank 7th in the nation in gun deaths. Did you kind of scratch your head, Glenn, and say, wonder where they're getting those statistics, considering Chicago or Illinois isn't ahead of us in those statistics?
Well, they used numbers, per capita numbers, and pointed out that all the states that were in the article are smaller population states, number one, and they're cherry picking the numbers and twisting them to where they have their benefit. And then one of the other things that I noticed when I read the article was they pointed out a case where a gentleman had a gun and passed the background check but shouldn't have, and then went on to criticize that we don't have universal background checks, but yet pointed out that the background check failed in this particular case. And in several of the other instances that they pointed out in the article were pretty much the same thing, where the laws that they would say they wanted wouldn't have worked anyways.
Yeah, and that's interesting. They also said that they quoted a law enforcement officer in this article who said, a lot of these gun crimes that you're referring to are done by folks who've obtained them illegally in the first place. They're stolen guns or something like that.
Yep. It's actually full of contradictions on what they want versus what the reality is, and it's it's a sad state. They point out they use the largest number that they can find for the number of deaths in the state, and then point out that over half of them are suicide, and then start pointing out things like accidents, but neglect to say how many of those deaths are from self-defense or crime prevention or police activity.
and what's funny is in my inbox this morning, Glenn, as I was, preparing for our interview, the Daily Signal, I get a notification. I subscribe to the Daily Signal, and they send me this commentary by Walter E. Williams, who is a patriot and a really, really sharp guy. And he writes, during the weekend of August 4th through the 5th and the preceding Friday night, 12 Chicagoans were shot dead and 62 others were shot and wounded, according to the Chicago Tribune. Now, I didn't see that anywhere in the Gazette's article where you compare, here's Chicago, this is the city with the most restrictive gun laws in the country, and yet every weekend people are dying like flies up there.
Yeah, and the thing is that I see articles continuously the same thing. Well, there was, over holiday weekend, there was 70 shot and teens, 20s murdered. And the thing is that they have a paradise for the liberal left in gun control, and yet there's an epidemic there. It points out the hypocrisy and the fact that what they propose really does not work. The thing is that when you ask someone like from the Moms Demand Action to explain exactly how one of these laws would prevent the crime, they really can't give you a way that it is going to prevent crime. All they can give you is that, well, we want these because all the states that have these have lower per capita gun violence. And the thing is that they always use inflated numbers. If a hunter drops his rifle out of a deer stand and shoots himself, that's gun violence. If somebody drops a box of ammunition and breaks a toe, that's gun violence. And so, they use these inflated numbers and really don't look for an actual way to reduce the violence. They don't point out that guns are used to prevent crime, to save lives.
I take articles like this very seriously because I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to put pressure on lawmakers to restrict our gun rights. They're trying to say, look, we need an emotional reaction. I mean, they quote Moms Demand Action through here, and it's really. I mean, I feel like we've got to you got to meet the challenge head on. You got to get out in front of it. You got to say, listen. I mean, you're trying to essentially weaken my right to human defense. Glenn, what's the difference?
Exactly.
What's the difference between rights and privileges? They think that it's a privilege to carry a gun. We think that it's a right to carry a gun.
Well, obviously, a privilege is something that can be taken or given at the whim of the government, and a right is something that just cannot be taken. And the thing is with the Moms Demand Action pushing this stuff, from this article, what I picked up out of it is the next big push in the next legislative session is going to be red flag laws, and really that denies people their rights by taking the guns first, and then you have a process to get them back. You're guilty until proven innocent, which is not what our Constitution protects us from.
Yeah, and I noticed also Senator Trent Garner is quoted here saying, listen, when I buy a gun, I want to have that gun as soon as possible. I want to have access to it as soon as possible. I think all of us want that as well, I'm going out to buy a gun.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to wait for it, especially if you're a law-abiding citizen? And, this is again, it's the difference between having a right and a privilege. And, some of these people in positions of power, some of these people writing these articles, they think that it is a privilege. They think we should have to check in with the government before we use our human right to self-defense, and it really is a deviation. Listen, I understand, Glenn, why people don't see guns as tools anymore, because they're not around them as much. They're not used as much, with the way they were, decades ago. But that doesn't mean that our rights have changed, and that's really where Patriots of Act 746 comes in as well. You guys are trying to educate people. Guns are not sentient beings that float around and decide who's going to die next. that's people that do that, and you guys are standing up and educating people on what their rights are, and I think that's very admirable.
Well, the thing is, education is the key to a lot of stuff, including safety. Being able to handle a gun properly, to understand what the laws are, to understand what your rights are, is really essential to keeping a free society. Whether it is gun rights or voting rights, or your Fourth Amendment rights, or even with issue 1 with Seventh Amendment rights, right to a jury trial. These are all things that the education is key to keeping us with liberty.
Hey, let's talk about that real quick. You brought up issue 1, just as a private citizen. What are your thoughts on issue 1? Does it concern you at all?
It concerns me a lot. Putting a price on the life of a person. This bill was written by lobbyists for the nursing homes, and as much as I hate to say this, I really don't trust the legislature to be able to suddenly enact rules for the courtroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't either. That's my biggest one. I mean, aside from capping, there's a ton of bad stuff in this bill, but being down to the Marble Palace long enough, seeing how the special interest operates, I don't trust those guys at all to not do the will of some company somewhere's in some lawsuit, and now all of a sudden they set the rules of evidence for the jury to consider. That's going to go bad.
Yes, exactly. It's going to be set in favor of large corporations and the folks that have a money interest, a vested interest in. It's not going to be something that will benefit the citizens of Arkansas.
Yeah. Hey, Glenn, I really appreciate it. Are you guys got any celebration plans tomorrow for the anniversary? How many years has it been, Glenn?
It has been.
Go ahead.
It has been 5 years. When it was passed, there were a couple Constitution carry walks, and but so far as I know, we don't have anything planned for the anniversary. However, we're continuing it with education, and there are several chapters that are having monthly meetings. I don't have the information right in front of me, but I know the Southeast chapter is having a meeting this month, and the Northwest Arkansas chapter is having a meeting this month, coming up in the next couple of weeks, and I believe the Northeast chapter just had a meeting.
Yeah, they did this past Saturday. It was in Batesville. So, yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see the individual regional chapters organize. It's really, really good. It's a grassroots organization, folks. It's called the Patriots of Act 746. They're on a mission. They're educating people about your gun rights here in Arkansas. And if you want to know more, go to Facebook and type in the search bar, Patriots of Act 746, and request to join this Facebook group. It's exploding, and it's really grassroots, and it's people who are just trying to educate folks on what your rights are. You should know your rights. And, Glenn, I appreciate you coming on, Glenn Britland. It's always great to have you on, sir.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate being on here.
All righty.
And you have a good day.
Okay, you have a great day. Glenn, folks, we're going to take a break. This is Conduit News Radio. We got a great show for you coming up.